Disclaimer: the following program is designed to offend, provoke, and challenge your religious sensibilities. It contains content that will likely offend anyone who holds religion sacred. This is for those with thick skin or a taste for the harsh truth. If you're easily offended or cherish your religious views, please turn off now. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned. All right, folks, today's episode of Troll the Verse is brought to you by God sanctioning land grabs, paranoia, and ancient real estate feuds. That's right, we're tackling Genesis 11, 12, and 13 in one go because, to be honest, 11 and 13 aren't as interesting as 12 is. So we'll briefly do some mentions of those, but not much. Now, let me be clear. Chapter 12 is going to make a lot of believers very angry. And why? Because they haven't actually read their own Bible. That's not my problem. That's not my fault. I have a very clear warning at the start of every Troll the Verse video telling people not to watch if they're sensitive to criticism of their beliefs. So before anyone gets mad, please remember, I did not put these words on the page. I am not responsible for what you couldn't read and figure out for yourself. And don't forget, we have full Troll the Verse playlists for Genesis, Matthew, Revelation, and now the Book of Mormon. So if you want to watch us rip apart religious texts from the beginning, check the description. Also, don't like, don't comment, and definitely don't subscribe, unless, of course, you enjoy sarcasm, biblical contradictions, and watching people lose their minds in the comments. In that case, you know what to do. Now, let's see what new disaster Genesis has to offer us today. Genesis 11 gives us the Tower of Babel, where humanity dares to cooperate and God immediately panics. His response? He comes down, because apparently omniscience doesn't include being able to see from a distance. And he's not alone. He says, "Let us go down," which raises the question, who's the us here? A leftover polytheistic slip-up? Either way, the solution is peak pettiness, scrambling human language, not because they're sinning, but because they might accomplish something. The genealogy that follows is equally unhinged. God allegedly capped lifespans at 120 years in Genesis 6, yet Shem still clocks in at 600. Some names go missing depending on which manuscript you read, and we get Ur of the Chaldees centuries before the Chaldeans existed. Then there's Abram's dad, Terah, who was already en route to Canaan before God supposedly called Abram. And that's basically Genesis 11, where human success is treated as a problem, God forgets his own life expectancy rule, and biblical math remains a disaster. Moving on. So Yahweh tells Abram to leave everything behind, his home, his family, and his inheritance, to go somewhere. No specific location is given, just start walking and I'll let you know later. And what's the trade-off? A series of sweeping promises. I make thee become a great nation, which is interesting, considering he has no children and his wife is infertile. I bless thee and make thy name great. Apparently, Abram is now the most important person in history. Be thou a blessing, which is completely undefined. I bless those blessing thee, and him who is disesteeming thee I curse. So divine favoritism is built into the deal. If you like Abram, you get blessings. If you don't, you get cursed. Then we get the blessed in thee have been all families of the ground. An odd statement considering the actual history of Abram's descendants includes slavery, exile, and religious wars. And notably, Abram isn't required to do anything. No tests, no qualifications, no moral expectations. He's simply chosen. Even more bizarre, he never questions any of this. He doesn't ask why me, or where exactly am I going, or what's the catch. He just obeys without hesitation. Later in the Bible, Moses, Gideon, and others argue with God, but Abram never asked for clarity. Blind obedience from the start. And why was he chosen? The text never says. Noah was chosen for being righteous in his generation. Job was blameless and upright. Abram, no explanation given. So, to sum it up real quick, no clear instructions, no reason given for choosing Abram over anyone else. A system where your treatment by God depends entirely on how you feel about Abram. This is the foundation of the Abrahamic covenant, a one-sided agreement where Yahweh hands out land, power, and influence to Abram and his descendants, while anyone who doesn't go along with it is automatically on the wrong side of divine judgment. Abram, at 75 years old, sets off on this journey without question or hesitation, because why would a man at retirement age ever doubt a mysterious voice telling him to leave everything behind? And he doesn't travel light. He brings his wife, Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the wealth and possessions he has acquired, the persons that they have obtained, which, to put it plainly, means slaves. This isn't just a man and his wife going on a spiritual quest. Abram is leading a full-scale migration, complete with wealth, livestock, and human property. Now, before anyone jumps into the comments and says they weren't slaves, this verse says, persons that they have obtained. The Bible avoids calling them slaves outright, but the wording is identical to later passages about Israelite slave ownership. So, yes, Abram owns people. They go out to go towards the land of Canaan, and they come into the land of Canaan, which is just a roundabout way of saying they traveled, then arrived, the land of Canaan. Another small detail, people already lived there, but since Yahweh promised it to Abram, the locals don't seem to matter. And once again, Abram asks no questions. Not, is this ethical? Not, what do we do when we get there? Not even, what about the people already living in Canaan? Nothing. He just packs up his entire estate, including the slaves, and moves in. Abram arrives in Canaan where people already live, but Yahweh declares it's all for Abram's descendants. The Canaanite is then in the land, obviously minor detail, they're just the current inhabitants. No treaties, no negotiations, just a divine decree that their home now belongs to someone else. To thy seed I give this land, because nothing says justice and fairness like giving away someone else's home. But let's not skip over the real problem here. And Jehovah appeareth unto Abram. I thought nobody could see God and live. That's what it says in Exodus 33:20 and John 1:18. So did Abram just get a free pass? Did Yahweh change his mind later? Or is this just another contradiction? And just like that, Abram is promised an entire land that he didn't discover, didn't build, and didn't have to fight for. So what does he do? Builds an altar. No questions, no concerns, just instant gratitude for the land grab. Abram continues his nomadic lifestyle, wandering from place to place, building altars and calling on Jehovah's name. Buildeth there an altar, because when claiming foreign lands, it's important to leave a religious landmark behind. It says he preacheth in the name of Jehovah. To whom exactly? The text doesn't say, but if he's preaching to the Canaanites, the people already living there, one can only imagine how well that was received. A foreigner wanders into their land, builds an altar to an unknown god, and starts preaching. He's not a king, not a conqueror, not even an ambassador, just a man who claimed the land because his God said so. At best, the Canaanites ignored him. At worst, they saw him as a threat. Either way, it's safe to assume they weren't thrilled. Journeying towards the south, always on the move, possibly avoiding awkward conversations with the locals he just took land from. How is he taking the land? Genesis 12 doesn't say. Yahweh declares it Abram's land, but there's no mention of conquest yet. This isn't a war, it's divine entitlement. Later in the Bible, Abram's descendants will absolutely take land by force, see Joshua, Judges, etc. But right now it's just, this is yours because I said so. At this point, Abram still doesn't own anything. He's traveling through occupied land, setting up altars and acting like he's already in charge. So the great patriarch of the faith faces his first challenge, a famine. Instead of trusting Yahweh, who just promised him land and blessings, he immediately abandons the so-called promised land and heads straight into Egypt. And once he gets there, he panics. Instead of trusting God to protect him, he decides on deception. Instead of protecting his wife, he puts her in harm's way to save himself. He tries to flatter her here before his big ask. He says, "Thou art a woman of beautiful appearance." So then he says, "Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister." So basically, tell everyone you're my sister. Because let's be real, honesty is overrated when your life is on the line. His reasoning to her is that, so that it is well with me because of thee. There it is. Abram's priority isn't Sarai's safety, it's his own. And let's just pause here. Abram doesn't ask Yahweh for help. He doesn't leave Egypt alone. Instead, he pawns off his wife as his sister so he won't be killed, even though this could mean Sarai ends up in Pharaoh's household. This is the man Yahweh just made a divine covenant with. Really sit with this and think about this for just a minute. So just as Abram predicted, the Egyptians see Sarai, recognize her beauty, and take her straight to Pharaoh. And Abram, he gets rewarded for it. The woman is taken to Pharaoh's house. Taken. Not asked, not invited, just taken. No objections from Abram. No indication that Sarai had any say in the matter. Consent, not part of the equation. To Abram, he hath done well for her sake. So let me make this clear. Pharaoh gives Abram livestock, wealth, and slaves in exchange for his wife. Abram lies about Sarai being his sister. Pharaoh takes her into his household. Abram gets rich off the deal. So this isn't just deception. This is Abram profiting off his wife's situation. At no point does Abram try to stop this, ask Yahweh for help, show concern for what happens to Sarai. His entire focus is on saving himself. So let me sum this up for those of you who aren't quite getting it. Abram trades his wife for wealth. Pharaoh takes her. Abram gets wealthy from it. Sarai is completely voiceless in the entire situation. And this is the man Yahweh is blessing. Now, I can't say what I really want to say here, or YouTube will take this video down, but I'm old, so let me put it in a way the old crowd and hopefully the new crowd will understand. This is what we understand as Van Buren Street. All right, so Abram lies, Pharaoh unknowingly takes Sarai, Jehovah gets mad and punishes Pharaoh, Jehovah plagueth Pharaoh and his house. So if you didn't catch that, Abram deceives Pharaoh, but Pharaoh is the one who gets punished, because that makes sense. Why hast thou not declared to me that she is thy wife? Even Pharaoh is confused. You know it's bad when the so-called pagan king has better morals than the chosen patriarch. He tells Abram, and now lo, thy wife take and go. So pretty much get out, you lunatic. Pharaoh has every reason to be furious, but instead of having Abram executed for fraud, he just kicks him out of Egypt. And the best part? Abram leaves richer than when he came. He keeps all the wealth Pharaoh gave him as a result of this deception. No punishment, no consequences, he gets rewarded. So to summarize, again, because I want to make sure this is very clear, Abram lies, Pharaoh unknowingly does wrong, Yahweh punishes Pharaoh. Abram walks away rich, and this is supposed to be a lesson in divine justice. So after running a con in Egypt, getting rich off deception, and facing zero consequences, Abram strolls right back into Canaan like nothing happened. And now that he's loaded with wealth, livestock, and a personal entourage, the next logical step is obviously a family feud over land. Because when you scam your way into extreme wealth, why stop there? So Abram and his nephew Lot roll into Canaan loaded with wealth, livestock, and so many servants that the land literally can't handle them both. This, of course, leads to family drama because nothing causes tension like two rich guys fighting over who gets the better pasture. Abram, ever the diplomatic uncle, tells Lot, hey, pick wherever you want and I'll go the other way. Lot, proving he's got no hesitation, picks the lush, fertile Jordan Valley right next to Sodom. Yes, that Sodom. Foreshadowing? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Abram stays in Canaan, and God once again pops up to remind him, yeah, so all this land is yours forever, your descendants will be countless, etc. Basically repeating what he already said in Genesis 12, because apparently Abram needed the reminder. And that's Genesis 13. Basically, if you ever get the chance to pick land, maybe don't move next to a city destined for fire and brimstone. Genesis 12 is an entire college course in bad ethics, starring a God who hands out land that already belongs to other people, a patriarch trading his wife for wealth to save himself, a Pharaoh who gets punished for someone else's lie, a famine that immediately forces Abram to abandon the promised land. This is the guy God picked to start the most important covenant in human history. And the wildest part, and this isn't even the last time Abram pulls this exact same scam. He does it again in Genesis 20, and Yahweh still lets him get away with it. So if anyone ever tells you the Bible teaches strong moral values, just remind them that the first great patriarch of the faith was a lying con man who repeatedly used his wife as a bargaining chip and made his fortune by deceiving foreign leaders. See you next time, unless God decides to give away your house.